November 20th, 1943, Tarawa Atoll, Gilbert Islands. Corporal James McKinley pressed himself against the blood-soaked coral wall of a Japanese bunker entrance, his Winchester Model 1897 trench gun held at low ready. Inside the reinforced concrete structure, he could hear the shuffling of boots and the metallic click of Arisaka rifle bolts being drawn back. The Japanese Special Naval Landing Forces, elite Marines who had sworn to fight to the last man, were preparing for the inevitable American assault into their fortified position. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. McKinley had carried the Winchester for 3 months through training at Camp Pendleton, but this would be his first combat use of the weapon that his instructors had called the most devastating close-quarters tool in the Pacific arsenal. What none of them realized was that this single encounter would expose the most lethal close combat weapon system in Pacific warfare history, a pump-action shotgun with slam-fire capability that would shatter Japanese defensive tactics and create terror among enemy forces who had never imagined such devastating firepower could exist. The Pacific War had evolved into a brutal contest of close-quarters combat that conventional military doctrine had not anticipated. Japanese forces had fortified countless islands with interconnected bunker systems, cave networks, and tunnel complexes designed to maximize the defensive advantages of prepared positions against attacking forces armed with bolt-action rifles and semi-automatic weapons. Japanese Special Naval Landing Forces commanders had studied American weapons capabilities extensively, developing defensive tactics specifically designed to counter M1 Garand rifles and Browning automatic rifles. Their intelligence assessments indicated that American forces would be limited to aimed fire rates of 30 to 40 rounds per minute per rifleman during bunker assaults, rates that Japanese defenders could match or exceed from fortified positions.
What Japanese intelligence had failed to anticipate was the Winchester Model 1897 pump-action shotgun, a weapon that had been used during World War I but was now being deployed in configurations specifically optimized for Pacific Island combat. The trench gun variant featured a 20-inch barrel, heat shield, bayonet lug, and most significantly, a slam-fire capability that enabled rates of fire impossible with conventional firearms. The slam-fire mechanism represented a unique feature of the Winchester design. Unlike conventional firearms that required the trigger to be released between shots, the Model 1897 could fire continuously as long as the trigger remained depressed and the pump action was cycled. An experienced operator could achieve fire rates exceeding 4 rounds per second, delivering devastating volumes of double-aught buckshot that transformed close-quarters combat into one-sided slaughter. Master Sergeant Thomas Reeves, senior weapons instructor at the Marine Corps Base Quantico, had been developing tactical doctrine for trench gun employment in Pacific operations. His training manual contained observations that would prove prophetic regarding Japanese defensive vulnerabilities. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Japanese bunker defense relies on limiting American firepower through restricted engagement ranges and narrow firing ports, Reeves noted in his tactical assessment. Winchester trench guns eliminate these defensive advantages by delivering concentrated firepower that exceeds Japanese defensive capabilities by factors of 10 to 1 at close ranges. The concentrated firepower that Reeves described was the product of ammunition characteristics that Japanese defenders had never encountered. Each 12-gauge double-aught buckshot shell contained 9 .33 caliber lead pellets, meaning a single trigger pull delivered the equivalent of 9 simultaneous rifle shots. At combat ranges of 10 to 30 feet inside bunkers and tunnels, this created killing zones that conventional weapons could not achieve.
But the ammunition characteristics were only part of the Winchester's lethality.
The slam fire capability enabled trained Marines to empty a 6-round magazine in less than 2 seconds, delivering 54 projectiles in the time required to fire 3 to 4 aimed rifle shots. This rate of fire was creating tactical advantages that Japanese defensive planning had never considered. Lieutenant Commander Takeshi Nakamura, commanding the Special Naval Landing Forces garrison at Tarawa, had prepared defensive positions based on intelligence assessments that indicated American assault forces would be equipped with conventional rifles and light machine guns. His bunker designs incorporated firing ports positioned to create overlapping fields of fire that would devastate American infantry advancing with bolt-action rifles. American forces will be forced to approach our positions through narrow approaches where their numerical superiority becomes irrelevant, Nakamura had explained to his company commanders during defensive preparations. Our fortified positions will enable each defender to engage multiple attackers before they can achieve effective fire superiority. Nakamura's tactical calculations were mathematically sound based on conventional weapons performance, but they had not accounted for weapons systems that could deliver firepower volumes exceeding Japanese defensive assumptions by orders of magnitude. The Battle of Tarawa would provide the first large-scale demonstration of Winchester trench gun effectiveness against Japanese bunker defenses. American assault forces included specially equipped bunker buster teams armed with Winchester 1897 shotguns, flamethrowers, and demolition charges, combinations that would prove devastatingly effective against fortifications designed to resist conventional infantry weapons. Corporal McKinley's assault team consisted of 6 Marines, 2 riflemen providing covering fire, a flamethrower operator, a demolition specialist, and 2 shotgun operators tasked with clearing bunker interiors. Their mission was to neutralize a reinforced concrete bunker that had been holding up the American advance for over 3 hours, inflicting casualties on Marines attempting to advance through its overlapping fields of fire.
The bunker entrance was a narrow concrete tunnel approximately 4 feet wide and 6 feet high, designed to force attackers into single-file approach that would make them vulnerable to defensive fire from prepared positions. Japanese defenders inside had already repelled 2 assault attempts by Marines armed with M1 Garens, killing 4 Americans and wounding 7 others. McKinley chambered around in his Winchester and glanced at his partner, Private First Class Robert Chen, who carried an identical weapon. Both Marines had trained extensively in close-quarters tactics, but training exercises could not replicate the psychological pressure of actual combat against determined defenders fighting from fortified positions. "Stay behind me, maintain spacing, and don't stop firing once we're inside," McKinley told Chen, his voice barely audible over the sounds of combat erupting across Tarawa's beaches. "The Japs won't be expecting what we're carrying." The assault began with a white phosphorus grenade thrown into the bunker entrance, creating smoke and chaos that would mask the American approach. As soon as the grenade detonated, McKinley charged into the tunnel entrance with his Winchester at hip level, trigger already depressed, pump action ready to cycle. The interior tunnel extended 15 feet before opening into a larger chamber where Japanese defenders had positioned themselves behind sandbag barriers. McKinley could see muzzle flashes from at least 3 Arisaka rifles as defenders opened fire at the smoke-obscured tunnel entrance. What happened next would be described in Marine Corps after-action reports as the most one-sided close-quarters engagement of the Pacific War. McKinley began cycling his Winchester's pump action while maintaining trigger depression, unleashing a continuous stream of 00 buckshot that swept the bunker interior like a giant broom made of lead projectiles. The slam fire technique that McKinley employed delivered 6 rounds in 1.8 seconds, sending 54 individual pellets through the confined bunker space at velocities exceeding 1,200 feet per second. The Japanese defenders, positioned behind sandbag barriers designed to stop rifle bullets, were hit by multiple pellets that penetrated their cover and inflicted devastating wounds. Chen followed immediately behind McKinley, his own Winchester adding another 54 projectiles to the lethal storm of lead filling the bunker interior. The combined firepower of two slam-firing shotguns delivered 108 projectiles in less than 4 seconds, a volume of fire impossible to achieve with any conventional infantry weapon. The Japanese defenders were eliminated before they could fire more than 3 rifle shots. The bunker interior, designed to provide protection against conventional infantry weapons, had become a death trap when confronted with weapons that could deliver devastating firepower through confined spaces. McKinley's hands were shaking as he reloaded his Winchester, the adrenaline of close combat making fine motor control difficult. Behind him, Chen was vomiting from the stress and violence of what they had just experienced. But both Marines were alive, while the Japanese defenders who had held the bunker for hours had been neutralized in less than 10 seconds. Word of the bunker assault spread quickly through Marine units engaged in the bloody fight for Tarawa. The effectiveness of Winchester trench guns in close-quarters combat was being demonstrated repeatedly as bunker-clearing teams armed with shotguns achieved results that conventional infantry weapons could not match. Gunnery Sergeant Michael O'Brien, commanding a bunker-clearing platoon, had been monitoring combat reports with growing appreciation for the tactical advantages that Winchester shotguns provided. His assessment to regimental headquarters summarized the weapon's impact on close-quarters combat effectiveness. Winchester trench guns are achieving bunker clearance rates 3 times faster than conventional rifle-equipped teams, O'Brien reported. Japanese defensive positions designed to resist rifle fire provide no protection against shotgun volumes of fire at close ranges. Enemy casualties are approaching 100% in bunker engagements where trench guns are employed. The 100% casualty rates that O'Brien documented were creating psychological effects among Japanese defenders who survived initial encounters with American shotgun-armed Marines. Captured documents and prisoner interrogations revealed growing fear of American automatic shotguns that could deliver impossible rates of fire.
We were told American infantry carried rifles that fired single shots, requiring aim between each round, Tanaka explained through translators. The Americans who attacked our position had weapons that fired continuously without stopping, filling our bunker with projectiles too numerous to count. This weapon is more terrifying than flamethrowers because death comes instantly without warning. Tanaka's description of Winchester trench gun effects was being replicated in combat reports throughout the Pacific as Japanese forces encountered weapons they had not anticipated facing. The slam fire capability was creating tactical advantages that exceeded Japanese defensive planning assumptions. But the Winchester's effectiveness extended beyond pure firepower. The psychological impact of encountering weapons that could deliver such devastating volumes of fire in confined spaces was undermining Japanese defensive morale in ways that conventional weapons could not achieve. Major General Julian Smith, commanding the 2nd Marine Division at Tarawa, had been receiving combat reports that documented Winchester trench gun effectiveness with statistical precision. His assessment to Marine Corps headquarters would influence American tactical doctrine throughout the Pacific War. Winchester Model 1997 shotguns, equipped with slam fire capability, represent the most effective bunker-clearing weapon currently available to Marine infantry, Smith noted in his after-action report. Japanese defensive positions that resist conventional infantry assault are being neutralized by shotgun-equipped teams, with casualty rates favoring American forces by ratios exceeding 20-1. The 20-1 casualty ratios that Smith documented were unprecedented in close-quarters combat operations. Japanese defenders who had achieved impressive defensive success against rifle-equipped Marines were being overwhelmed by weapons that delivered firepower volumes their defensive preparations could not counter. The technical specifications that enabled Winchester dominance in close combat were becoming apparent to Marine Corps weapons analysts studying combat effectiveness data. The slam fire mechanism was providing fire rates that exceeded Japanese defensive capabilities by margins that made tactical victory inevitable.
Colonel Samuel Griffith, Marine Corps Weapons Development Officer, had been analyzing Winchester trench gun performance with growing appreciation for the weapon's tactical implications. His technical assessment identified specific characteristics that created advantages over conventional firearms.
Winchester Model 1897 slam-fire capability enables sustained fire rates of 240 rounds per minute, exceeding Browning automatic rifle sustained rates by factors of 2 to 1, Griffith noted in his weapons effectiveness study. Combined with 0.0 buckshot ammunition delivering 9 projectiles per round, effective projectile delivery rates approach 2,160 individual impacts per minute, firepower density impossible to achieve with any other man-portable weapon system. The firepower density that Griffith calculated was transforming close-quarters combat from contests of marksmanship and tactics into overwhelming demonstrations of industrial firepower that Japanese defenders could not survive. American industrial capacity was creating weapons that achieve tactical dominance through brute force rather than technical sophistication. But weapons effectiveness required trained operators who could exploit slam-fire capabilities under extreme combat stress. Marine Corps training programs were developing specialized instruction for trench gun operators that emphasized techniques specific to Pacific Island combat. Staff Sergeant Raymond Moore, conducting Winchester trench gun training at Camp Pendleton, had been developing instructional methods that prepared Marines for the psychological challenges of close-quarters bunker combat. His training emphasized speed, aggression, and continuous fire rather than aimed shooting. Bunker clearing with Winchester trench guns requires operators to maintain trigger depression while cycling pump action as rapidly as possible, Moore explained to trainee classes. Aimed fire is secondary to achieving maximum projectile density within confined spaces. Japanese defenders cannot survive sustained shotgun fire regardless of defensive preparations. Moore's methodology was producing Marines who could operate Winchester trench guns with efficiency that maximized the weapon's lethal potential. Graduates of his program were achieving combat effectiveness that exceeded conventional infantry capabilities by margins that Japanese defenders found impossible to counter. The combat effectiveness was being demonstrated across Pacific Island campaigns as Winchester-equipped Marines cleared bunker complexes that had resisted conventional assault for hours or days. Japanese defensive commanders were beginning to recognize that American shotgun tactics required fundamental revisions to defensive doctrine. The recognition was coming too late to affect Japanese defensive preparations at Tarawa, where American Marines armed with Winchester trench guns were systematically eliminating bunker positions throughout the atoll. The weapon that Japanese intelligence had dismissed as primitive was proving decisive in the brutal close-quarters combat that characterized Pacific Island warfare.
December 15, 1943. The tactical revolution was spreading across the Pacific theater faster than Japanese commanders could adapt their defensive doctrines. Marine Corps supply officers were receiving urgent requests for Winchester Model 1897 trench guns from every unit engaged in island assault operations. What had begun as specialized equipment for bunker clearing teams was becoming standard issue for forward assault companies facing Japanese fortified positions. The demand for Winchester shotguns was overwhelming Marine Corps supply chains that had not anticipated such rapid adoption of what many officers had initially considered a specialty weapon. Ordnance depots across the Pacific were reporting shortages as combat units requested quantities that exceeded pre-war procurement planning by factors of 5 to 1. Colonel William Whaling, Marine Corps Ordnance Officer for Pacific Operations, had been struggling to meet the insatiable demand for trench guns from combat units that had witnessed their effectiveness firsthand. His supply reports to Marine Corps headquarters revealed the scope of tactical transformation occurring throughout the theater. Current Winchester trench gun requisitions exceed available inventory by 300%, Whaling reported in his December supply assessment. Combat units are requesting shotgun allocation sufficient to equip 25% of assault infantry, far exceeding original planning assumptions of 5% specialty weapon distribution.
The 25% allocation that combat commanders were requesting represented fundamental revision of infantry tactics based on combat experience that demonstrated Winchester's superiority in the close quarters fighting that characterized Pacific Island warfare. Japanese defensive preparations were proving vulnerable to weapons that conventional military doctrine had considered obsolete. The vulnerability of Japanese defenses was becoming apparent during the Marshall Islands campaign, where American assault forces equipped with unprecedented numbers of Winchester trench guns were achieving breakthrough rates that exceeded previous operational planning assumptions. Bunker complexes that should have required hours or days to reduce were being cleared in minutes by shotgun-equipped Marines. Major Lewis Walt, commanding 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines during the assault on Roy Namur, had restructured his entire tactical organization around Winchester's shotgun capabilities. His innovative approach was achieving results that would influence Marine Corps doctrine throughout the Pacific War. "I've assigned Winchester shotguns to every squad leader and increased overall allocation to 1 shotgun per 4 riflemen," Walt explained in his tactical assessment. This distribution enables rapid bunker clearance without requiring specialized teams. Any Marine fire team can now neutralize Japanese defensive positions that previously required coordination of multiple support elements. Walt's tactical innovation was enabling his battalion to maintain offensive momentum the Japanese defenders could not counter effectively. Bunker positions that should have channelized American advances were being overrun so quickly that Japanese defensive plans based on delaying actions collapsed completely. The collapse of Japanese defensive effectiveness was being documented in after-action reports that revealed the psychological impact of Winchester encounters on enemy morale. Japanese soldiers who survived initial shotgun attacks were demonstrating reluctance to maintain defensive positions when American forces approached. Captain Takeshi Yamamoto, commanding a reinforced company of Japanese Special Naval Landing Forces on Kwajalein, had been monitoring American tactical evolution with growing alarm. His defensive preparations, carefully designed based on previous combat experience, were proving inadequate against Marines equipped with weapons his intelligence assessments had not anticipated. American assault forces now employ automatic shotguns in concentrations that overwhelm our defensive positions before coordinated resistance can be organized, Yamamoto noted in his final combat report before his position was overrun. These weapons deliver firepower that exceeds our defensive planning assumptions by margins that make successful defense impossible. Yamamoto's assessment, recovered from his body after his bunker was cleared by Marines armed with Winchester trench guns, provided American intelligence with confirmation of the psychological impact that shotgun tactics were achieving. Japanese defensive confidence was being eroded by encounters with weapons that delivered devastating results in the confined spaces where Japanese tactics should have provided maximum advantage.
But the Winchester's tactical advantages extended beyond bunker clearing. Marine units were discovering that trench guns provided devastating effectiveness in jungle combat, where engagement ranges rarely exceeded 30 feet and visibility was limited by dense vegetation. The shotgun's spread pattern and rapid-fire capability were proving superior to rifles in environments where aimed fire was often impossible. Lieutenant Robert Leckie, commanding a rifle platoon during operations on Cape Gloucester, had equipped half his squad leaders with Winchester trench guns after observing their effectiveness in jungle engagements. His tactical assessment documented advantages that conventional weapons could not provide. Japanese infiltration tactics that were devastating against rifle-equipped units are being neutralized by Winchester shotguns that don't require precise aim in low-visibility conditions, Leckie reported to his company commander. The spread pattern and rapid-fire capability create defensive zones that Japanese infiltrators cannot penetrate without suffering immediate casualties. The defensive zones that Leckie described were transforming perimeter security operations as Marines discovered that a single shotgun-equipped sentry could cover areas that previously required multiple riflemen.
The psychological deterrent of encountering shotgun fire was causing Japanese infiltration attempts to fail before they could achieve tactical objectives. Japanese tactical commanders were being forced to revise infiltration doctrines that had achieved success against American forces armed with conventional weapons. The presence of Winchester-equipped Marines was creating defensive capabilities that Japanese night attack tactics could not overcome. Major Yoshio Takatsuka, planning infiltration operations for Japanese forces on Bougainville, had been forced to acknowledge that American shotgun employment was negating tactical advantages that Japanese forces had relied upon throughout the Pacific Campaign. His tactical assessment revealed the scope of Japanese doctrinal crisis. American shotgun defenses create kill zones that our infiltration tactics cannot penetrate without prohibitive casualties, Takatsuka noted in his operational planning documents. Traditional approaches that achieved success against rifle-equipped defenders result in immediate detection and elimination when confronting American positions defended by automatic shotguns.
Takatsuka's recognition of tactical defeat represented acknowledgement that American weapons innovation had created capabilities that Japanese forces could not counter with existing tactics. The Winchester trench gun was forcing fundamental revision of Japanese offensive and defensive doctrines across the Pacific theater. The revision of Japanese tactics was coming too late to prevent the systematic destruction of defensive positions throughout the island campaigns. American Marines armed with Winchester shotguns were achieving offensive results that exceeded all previous Pacific combat experience. The Battle of Peleliu in September 1944 would provide the ultimate demonstration of Winchester trench gun effectiveness against Japanese cave and tunnel defenses. The island's limestone formations contained hundreds of interconnected defensive positions that Japanese engineers had spent months fortifying into what they believed was an impregnable fortress. Colonel Kunio Nakagawa, commanding Japanese forces on Peleliu, had created defensive systems specifically designed to maximize American casualties through coordinated fire from mutually supporting positions. His defensive plan assumed that American forces would be limited to conventional infantry weapons that could be countered through prepared positions and coordinated fire. American assault forces will be channelized into killing zones where our defensive fires can inflict maximum casualties, Nakagawa had explained to his subordinate commanders. The cave systems provide protection that American weapons cannot penetrate effectively. We will hold each position until American casualties force them to abandon the assault. Nakagawa's defensive calculations were sound based on conventional weapons performance, but they had not accounted for the proliferation of Winchester trench guns throughout American assault units. Marine infantry companies attacking Peleliu carried Winchester shotguns in concentrations that exceeded anything previously seen in Pacific operations. First Lieutenant Andrew Haldane, commanding K Company, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, had equipped over 30% of his Marines with Winchester trench guns based on lessons learned during previous campaigns. His tactical approach emphasized speed and overwhelming firepower in close-quarters cave fighting.
"We're not going to stand outside caves trading fire with Japanese defenders," Haldane told his platoon commanders before the assault. "We're going straight in with shotguns and flamethrowers. The Winchester gives us firepower superiority that makes cave defense suicide for the Japanese." Haldane's aggressive tactics were achieving results that surpassed all expectations. Cave positions that Japanese engineers had calculated would require days to reduce were being cleared in hours by Marines who understood that Winchester trench guns provided decisive advantages in confined spaces. The confined spaces that characterized Peleliu's cave systems were proving ideal for shotgun employment. Japanese defenders positioned in caves discovered that their protected positions became death traps when Marines armed with Winchester shotguns entered the narrow passages. The slam fire capability enabled Marines to sweep cave interiors with volumes of fire that left no time for coordinated defense. Corporal Eugene Sledge, serving with K Company during the Peleliu assault, witnessed Winchester effectiveness in cave fighting that exceeded anything he had experienced in previous operations. His memoir would later describe the psychological impact of shotgun employment in the brutal close-quarters combat. The Winchester shotgun became the most feared weapon in our arsenal, Sledge would write. When we entered caves with those shotguns, the Japanese had no defense. The pump action could be fired so fast that the sound merged into one continuous roar. Nothing survived that kind of firepower in a confined space. Sledge's description of Winchester combat employment captured the reality of cave fighting, where Japanese defensive advantages were negated by American weapons that delivered overwhelming firepower in spaces where conventional tactics failed. These defensive advantages were being measured not just in Japanese casualties, but in the speed with which American forces were clearing defensive positions that should have required prolonged siege operations. Marine commanders were reporting breakthrough rates that exceeded operational planning assumptions by factors of 3 to 1.
Major General William Rupertus, commanding the 1st Marine Division on Pelileo, had initially predicted the island would be secured in 4 days, while the actual campaign required over 2 months due to the extent of Japanese fortifications. The rate at which individual positions were being cleared exceeded all previous Pacific combat experience. Winchester trench guns are enabling cave clearance rates that would be impossible with conventional weapons, Rupertus noted in his operational assessment. Positions that should require coordinated assault with multiple support elements are being neutralized by single squads equipped with shotguns and demolitions. The single-squad clearance capability that Rupertus observed was revolutionizing small-unit tactics, as Marine commanders discovered that platoon-level operations could achieve objectives that previously required company or battalion coordination. The tactical flexibility provided by Winchester-equipped units was enabling operational tempo that Japanese defenders could not match. Japanese defensive commanders were recognizing that American shotgun tactics had created capabilities that their fortifications could not counter effectively. Captured documents revealed growing desperation among Japanese officers who understood that traditional defensive approaches were failing against weapons they had never anticipated encountering. Colonel Nakagawa's final message to Japanese High Command, transmitted before American forces overran his command post, acknowledged the futility of defending against American forces equipped with Winchester trench guns and supporting weapons that Japanese defensive planning had not considered. American automatic shotguns have negated our defensive advantages in cave warfare, Nakagawa reported in his final transmission. These weapons deliver firepower in confined spaces that our positions cannot withstand. Recommend future defensive planning account for American shotgun capabilities that current doctrine does not address. Nakagawa's final assessment represented official acknowledgement that American weapons innovation had created tactical advantages that Japanese forces could not overcome through improved fortifications or revised tactics. The Winchester trench gun had become the decisive weapon in the close-quarters fighting that characterized Pacific Island warfare. By early 1945, Winchester Model 1897 trench guns had become so prevalent in Marine infantry units that Japanese intelligence assessments identified them as primary American infantry weapons rather than specialty equipment. The tactical transformation was complete. American forces had adapted their entire approach to island warfare around capabilities that Winchester shotguns provided. The adaptation extended to training programs where new Marine recruits received shotgun instruction as standard infantry training rather than specialized weapons qualification. The Marine Corps was institutionalizing lessons learned through brutal Pacific combat that had demonstrated Winchester's superiority in environments where Japanese defensive tactics should have provided maximum advantage. Staff Sergeant Daniel Lawler, conducting infantry training at Camp Pendleton in early 1945, had incorporated Winchester trench gun employment as fundamental infantry skill rather than advanced specialty training. His instructional approach reflected the complete tactical evolution that had occurred over 3 years of Pacific combat.
Every Marine needs to know how to operate a Winchester trench gun, Lawler explained to trainee classes. You're going to encounter Japanese defensive positions where the shotgun is the only weapon that provides sufficient firepower to survive. This isn't specialty equipment anymore. It's basic infantry gear. Lawler's training philosophy reflected combat reality that had transformed American infantry tactics throughout the Pacific. The weapon that Japanese Marines had never expected to encounter had become the standard tool for close-quarters combat that determined success or failure in the brutal island fighting. The brutal fighting would continue until Japanese surrender in August 1945, but the tactical lessons were already established. American industrial capacity had produced not just advanced technology, but had recognized the continued utility of weapons that delivered devastating effectiveness in specific combat environments. The Winchester Model 1897, designed decades earlier, had proven more effective than advanced rifles in the close-quarters jungle and cave fighting that characterized Pacific warfare.
Japanese Special Naval Landing Forces, elite Marines who had sworn to fight with samurai spirit and tactical excellence, had been defeated not by superior tactics or greater courage, but by American weapons that delivered firepower they had never imagined possible. The slam-fire shotgun had shattered defensive doctrines and created terror among soldiers who had believed their fortifications were impregnable. The impregnable fortifications had proven vulnerable to industrial weapons that prioritized devastating effect over technological sophistication. American pragmatism had triumphed over Japanese tactical doctrine, demonstrating that sometimes the simplest weapons, properly employed, could achieve results that complex military theory could not predict.